All right, if you have not seen Sir Loras Tyrell's armor in Game of Thrones, then you need to go look it up right now. And then I want you to think about your character in Dungeons & Dragons and think about when was the last time you thought about their armor, this outward-facing, beautifully designed and crafted thing that you wear to protect you. Did you walk into town in your last adventure wearing a suit of armor that you haven't paid attention to in 6 months of campaigning? It probably looks like garbage, and I think you really need to think about that. Your armor bears the brunt of everything that comes at you in combat, and it takes a beating. You need to pay attention to your armor. You need to fix it. Let's talk about some mechanics on how to make this part of your game better. I'll see you in a few minutes. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance, your Dungeons & Dragons podcast, where every week Garrett and I take a ruler mechanic in the game of D&D that's lackluster or needs improvement, and we offer you advice on how to make your game around that rule more interesting or more fun. So sharpen up those daggers. We're getting started right now. Hey everybody, welcome to iCast Guidance. This is your Dungeons & Dragons podcast where Garrett and I will go over a topic every week, and then we kind of break it down and discuss what's broken, how to make it better for your game, and hopefully give you some tools to work with. So, how you doing, Garrett?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing okay.
Awesome.
We did this live a couple weeks ago on our Wither and Bloom YouTube channel.
Yeah, we did.
And we went into a little bit about the physical aspects of armor. We looked at the history of armor. For the purposes of this podcast, though, I'd like our listeners to kind of have a better understanding of how armor and armor class can be broken down into some of the more nuanced aspects and how they can build detail into their game around that.
Okay.
All right. So one of the things we talked about in the history of armor class last time was about in Dungeons & Dragons 1E, we had this notion of THAC0, which I tried to explain to you.
You tried to explain it.
It did not go well.
I have, for anyone out there, I started with 5e. I know nothing about this system, this THAC0 system that Todd tried to explain. It was confusing. Even looking at a chart, it was still a little confusing.
Yes, it was confusing for us back then. And I even made the announcement in that video that I was like, this was my 10-year-old brain back then trying to figure out how this worked, and I might not have remembered it correctly. So what I'm going to say for all of you out there is from the simplest standpoint, and we're going to go through how armor class functions in the basic sense for 5e in a minute, but every armor class system starts with a base number of, at least in Dungeons & Dragons, every armor class system starts with a base number of 10. And back in the days of THAC0, we counted backwards from 10. So the lower your armor class was, the better off you were, the more able you were to avoid a hit. Now, if you want to know more about how THAC0 worked, or if you'd like to be able to, at your next nerd cocktail party, talk about THAC0 as if you have some knowledge, I'm going to be putting a video up on the Wither and Bloom Studios YouTube channel that will give some visual references and hopefully be able to clear the air on this finally. Okay.
Yeah.
So head over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube to check that out. But in the basic sense, you went backwards from 10 down to 0 and below 0. For 5e, it's different. So Garrett, why don't you give us the rules as stated?
Yeah. So, I mean, in the player's handbook, your armor class, or AC as short, represents how well your character avoids being wounded in battle. Things that contribute to your AC include the armor you wear, the shield you carry, and your dexterity modifier. And in certain circumstances, certain classes use other things, strength, dex, a combo of everything. But essentially, your armor class is how hard it is to hit you.
Right.
Armor is a whole separate thing. I'm talking, the piece of armor you wear, or the shield that you carry. But armor class is how you can get hit.
Armor class is the larger umbrella that includes many factors.
Yes.
And
it's complex.
Yeah. And I think this is where it becomes problematic because, I mean, maybe not problematic. I think if we're going to have a system in place that helps us run our game, in this case, the mechanic of AC, it's got to have a lot sort of working, a lot of moving parts. I get that. But I think in the more sort of logical sense, armor class to me is, am I wearing studded leather? Am I wearing chain? Am I wearing plate? And what number is associated with that? Let's go. Right. And this is a problem for a number of reasons, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Like I had once said to you, I'm like, when I was kind of talking about my problem with all of this, I had said to you, look, if I'm a big guy and I'm wearing a suit of plate and you're in combat with me and you've got a two-handed broadsword, you are not going to miss me. The basic mechanic says I make an attack on you. I roll a 20-sided die. I add whatever modifiers for the attack I have to that to see if I hit. And the language says, do I hit? Now I get it. We're trying to simplify things and I'm not trying to nitpick the language here, but do I hit you? Well, hell yeah. There's no way I'm going to miss you if you're that big and you're wearing this suit of plate. You're not diving out of the way. I'm hitting you with that sword. So right there, we sort of begin to experience the breakdown of how all of this doesn't quite add up and becomes a little bit confusing.
I saw that exact comment online where someone made a comment. If you're wearing a full suit of plate armor and I'm swinging at you, you're getting hit. It's a matter of, does it get through?
Right.
Ultimately.
Right.
It's, you could have totally missed, but if you rolled close to that number, you're going to hit you. Right. It's just a matter of the armor's doing its job in protecting you.
Right.
Is ultimately what it is.
But I want our listeners to remember this part of the conversation for later. This notion of, does it get through? Does it hit in the sense that, does it get through the armor? Because later we're going to talk a lot about the armor's sustainability, the armor's ability to hold up. And we'll get into a whole section on that in a little while. But I want you to remember that, because this, again, is, does it get through, is part of the problem. At least as far as I'm concerned, it's part of the problem. So again, I think our job here in this podcast, in breaking down where some of these things could be better defined and sort of logically parsed out in a way that sort of makes a lot more sense, we're starting to creep into that area now. All right. So we got to add things to this, like dexterity and modifiers to dexterity. And those things change depending on, number one, am I agile? Do I have a 16 or a 17 dex or even a 14 dex? Do I have a plus modifier to my dexterity? Number one. Number two, am I wearing a suit of heavy armor that gives me a negative modifier to my dexterity and essentially slows me down?
Yeah. I mean, all heavy armors, or I shouldn't say all, most, you're going to have disadvantage on stealth because you're a big clanky, I'm
loud.
Yeah, you're loud. You're wearing a bunch of metal banging around. So that definitely factors into it here. But most of the lighter armors, they all benefit from your dexterity modifier.
Right.
Because in theory, it's not necessarily what the armor's doing. It's what your dex is doing to avoid that attack.
Right. And I would imagine that if I had a well-crafted suit of, let's say, padded leather, and it fit me properly because I was tailored for it, it's actually going to allow me to move in a much more sort of limber fashion, right? It's sort of like, it's the Lululemon of, that was a fucking terrible thing to say, right? I mean, it's like, but if you have a good pair of yoga pants, I have no idea what that even means, but I would imagine that those pants make you look like you move better, right? It just feels that way.
Okay. Yeah. Love your reference there.
Right. But the idea is that if you have a well-made garment, whether it's for protection or not, it should help your dexterity, right? Athletic wear, armor as athletic wear. Great. But that only goes so far. Like if you tie all the pots and the pans in the kitchen to yourself, you're obviously not going to move very easily. Got it. Okay. So, Where was we going? Where are we going?
I don't know.
Oh, we were talking about how the benefits of light armor, how light armor tends to be beneficial in that it's not impacted by, it doesn't hurt your dexterity.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
And I mean, I guess to, go with that, heavier armors, most of them have a strength requirement to be able to wear them.
Right.
So that makes sense. I mean, you got to be strong enough to carry a 100-pound or 70-pound suit of plate armor.
Right. But don't forget, and this is one of the things I think that we went over in the last time we talked about this, and I think this is important, is if you have a well-crafted, just like I made the comment about a well-crafted suit of padded leather, a well-crafted suit of plate will distribute the weight so evenly across the body that it doesn't feel like you're picking up a 70-pound sack.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you have 70 pounds. It doesn't feel like you have 70 pounds on at all. And you have almost
it's distributed.
You have full movement in this thing, which is also pretty mind-bending. All right, so here's the thing, is at the end of the day, you create your character, you take your modifiers, you take the suit of armor you equip yourself with, you write down a number in your little shield on your sheet that says AC of 16.
Yep.
Fine. And then we forget about it. I think a lot of players at that point say, my AC is 15. I know my number. When the DM rolls to see if an adversary is attacking me, I know if he hits or not. And then we just leave it alone until an opportunity comes up down the road to maybe get a better suit of armor.
Yeah.
But there's problems with that, right? So donning and doffing armor, putting on armor, taking off armor. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think that gets pushed to the side a lot in this game. I'm not going to sleep in a full set of plate armor every single night, but I think a lot of the times we just don't think about it. Donning and doffing armor is something that, and it needs to be considered, because to take off that full suit. Do you have the chart?
I don't have the chart in front of me.
I have it. It's kind of condensed. Okay, wait. To don, it takes 10 minutes to put on a heavy suit of armor, 5 minutes to take it off.
Right.
I mean,
so just to put that into a context.
Yes.
You take off your armor for your long rest. Let's pretend we're playing properly.
Yeah.
You're going to take a long rest. You're wearing plate. You take the 5 minutes, you take your plate off. And the first watch is taken by the rogue in the party who spots something in the bushes. And all of a sudden we're rolling for initiative. You are now unarmored. You are vulnerable. It takes 10 minutes to put on your armor. That is how many rounds of combat? It's 10. It's 6 seconds per round. Oh God, no, it's 60.
Yeah, it's 60.
So I'm totally off. It's 60 rounds of combat. Yeah, my bad. I'm not doing math right. My brain's a little slow right now. But okay, 60 rounds of combat. Most combat ends in 3 rounds.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got a problem here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that, there's 5e rules is written. That's why we're getting into this. There's no penalties in the book for wearing your armor while you sleep.
Currently, there's no penalties in the book, but there used to be.
Yes.
Yes.
We did find in an older edition, 3.5, there was a penalty to, it was stated, a character who sleeps in medium or heavy armor are fatigued the following day. He or she takes a -2 penalty to strength and dex and can't charge or run. But 5e doesn't have any rules on sleeping in armor.
Right. And the notions or the mechanics of charge and run have been modified now into different movement mechanics for 5e.
Yeah.
So, but this is interesting to me because now all of a sudden, if you want to bring a more detailed and nuanced play into your game around the notions of armor, and you want to say, yeah, we're going to settle down for the night. We're going to take a long rest. We're going to take our armor off. Okay. This does a couple of things. One, the party's vulnerable. That makes the night watch that much more intense. It's important now.
Right. Yeah, if you're not wearing your armor, you're definitely losing quite a bit of that,
you're going to an armor class.
Ability.
Yeah. You're going to an armor class of 10. And if you happen to have a dexterity modifier, awesome. But that's it. And you might be able to grab a shield.
The only people that really benefit from it would say be barbarians, probably, because they're usually unarmored, or any of the classes that are unarmored.
Right.
Monks, barbarians, etc.
Right.
Because they're like, I don't, whatever. Grabbing a shield is just an action. Exactly. So you could grab a shield.
Right.
Get that +2.
Right. And for the DMs out there, and I'm not trying to say that it's the DM's job to work against your party, but this is a place where you can really turn the meter to red, and you can say, you really need your tanks. You need that paladin in this fight, or whatever. So it does that. First of all, it kind of gives gravity to that night watch. The other thing it does is it kind of introduces now this opportunity for you to say, okay, maybe the party wants to sleep with its armor on. What are the consequences for doing that? So there was a rule in there where it says, okay, the party's fatigued, and that meant something in 3.5. Yeah. Can we introduce homebrew or house rules that say something different? And I've got some things that I use, but what are some things you found something? Didn't you were looking at something, or am I mistaken there?
I don't have anything particular. I only had the information that 3.5 offered.
Was 3.5 the one who said the version that said if you sleep in heavy armor, you only regain 25% of your hit dice also? Because that came up. No, that was in Xanathar's.
That might be something in Xanathar's. I
think that's in Xanathar's. So in Xanathar's, it has this reference to if you sleep in heavy armor, you only regain 25% of your hit dice. Now that's curious to me because I think the reference was pretty loose. It didn't really get into a whole lot of detail on that.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I just looked it up really quick. Xanathar's did implement that sleeping in medium or heavy, you would only regain a quarter of your hit dice. Okay. I mean,
so that means to me that the next day, anytime you want to take a short rest, you now only have a quarter. So if you were a level 8, you now only have 2 hit dice that you can regain.
If you had spent all of them the previous day. That's the thing. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
If you're not running multiple combats and you're expending all those things, that's not too much of a penalty, if you ask me.
I agree, especially for sleeping in heavy armor. I mean, you're not going to sleep well in heavy armor.
I think the 3.5 rules did it better, where you have a penalty it's a -2 penalty to your strength and your dexterity. The whole can't charge or run, I mean,
it's irrelevant.
We brought it up. Maybe you can't use the dash action if you're a rogue or something like that. But I was saying, I mean, me personally, if I don't get a good night's sleep, if I was, I'm sleeping on the floor.
Right.
I'm waking up the next day. I'm not moving as quick as I normally would.
No. And the other thing is like, how old is your character? Like, we didn't even bring age into this, right? It's sort of like if you are middle-aged or beyond, in reality, especially if you sleep on the floor, but just in general, when you get up, your dexterity is seriously hobbled. Like if you're a human and you're 55 years old, you get up in the morning, it's not moving that fast. So if you sleep in plate, come on.
This goes back to the whole notion that you magically go to sleep every single night in Dungeons and Dragons and you wake up perfectly fine the next day. We talk about this all the time.
And this is the reason we love to play the game, is because we really want it to be that way, but we know that it's not. But another possible sort of house rule I could think of is, let's say I wanted to resurrect the notion of fatigue. Well, what would fatigue mean? So I'm suffering this condition, this house rule condition of fatigued because I slept in medium or heavy armor. Okay, so we said, okay, maybe you can't use a dash action until you have a full proper rest. Okay, what else? Well, maybe it's possible that if you are going to leave melee combat and offer up an attack of opportunity on the part of an adversary, that adversary now has advantage on the attack of opportunity because you just can't move as quickly as you used to be.
You're not going to be as,
right.
quick to get out of the way.
So I think a really interesting thing to create would be a list of these penalties, the consequences of the condition for sleeping in heavy armor, which really could be kind of cool.
Yeah. I agree, because ultimately, the way that it's written, we don't even think about it. And I think it's something to bring into the game to make it more believable.
Agreed. And that believability, especially when the party beds down for the long rest, is like, okay, what other, oftentimes it's like we're on the road, we're going to find a clearing or a place to sit down and have our long rest. What do? Well, we cook a meal, maybe we do some downtime activities, and then we appoint first watch and second watch. Mm-hmm. And that's it. Then we go to sleep. But if I'm going to be that vulnerable, I'm going to be unarmored. What else might I do? Mm-hmm. Would I rig up like some tripwires around the encampment to give me a slight advantage in terms of time and getting up? Am I going to, dig a pit? I don't know. But it could offer up some really interesting aspects of gameplay, the fiction, the narrative that we create to now that we've got this new thing going on.
I agree.
So, all right, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
And we're going to come right back after this because we're going to be starting to talk about how armor and damage to armor is a critical part of, the game and how we can bring that in and make that better. So we'll be right back. Hello, esteemed listeners. I just wanted to put a quick note out there that Garrett and I work really hard at bringing you this content. We spend our weeks thinking about the written rules of Dungeons and Dragons and trying to improve upon them. We bring a lot of this stuff into the house rules of our own games. So we're hoping that through this content, you will have an opportunity to make your game better. That's our primary interest. Now, at this point, the best way that you can support this podcast is to like it, follow it, download it every week, and listen to it. We love that you're here coming along for the ride, and we look forward to bringing you this content every week. In the future, we will be bringing you a Patreon subscriber page that's going to allow you to take a deeper dive into our content and the community that we're hoping to build. So please keep an eye out for that. We have lots of great ideas for how we can make special content for our Patreon subscribers to make this a better space. But in the meantime, tell your friends, spread the word, and give us some love. We really appreciate that. All right. Thanks again for listening. Let's get back to the show. All right. So, Garrett, we've been talking about a couple of the ways in which armor and armor class are broken. And a big one for me is this. We talked about it earlier. It's sort of like I roll that attack die. I add my attack modifiers to it. And did I hit you? Mm-hmm. And the question is not, did I hit you? Because my sword probably made contact with your armor, but did the sword get through? And the answer is, okay, yeah, I hit you. The armor did its job, sort of, and I passed through that armor and I caused damage. But we never talk about what happens to the armor itself. This is a problem.
Yeah, 5e has nothing. It's just armor's infinite. It's just I can get hit a million times and nothing talks about repairing armor or, it's one thing if it's magical armor. Maybe we can, not discuss that. But standard set of armor, it's going to get banged up. It's going to get damaged. Leather armor, it's going to get cut, right?
Yeah.
It's going to wear down. The wear and tear on armor is not a thing in the book. And I think it should be.
I agree 100%. And, I have to say that, from numerous standpoints, I want to talk about this. And, I could even go into this notion of how video games do this so much better. Mm-hmm. Where in a video game, when you have a suit of armor on and you've taken enough damage, you notice that there's usually, and I'm trying to think of a particular one that does it really well. Diablo used to do it really well.
I used to play World of Warcraft. And you need to get it repaired.
Correct. So why don't we do this in our actual tabletop role-playing game? So, for example, when armor begins to get damaged, does it have a lifespan? How sustainable is a set of leather armor that maybe you've been wearing for a 3-year campaign? Maybe it was just never your prerogative as a player character to upgrade your armor and you've just sort of jotted down your armor class and forgotten about it. And now that armor's a year old after taking how many hits?
Things rags and tags at this point.
Exactly. It's got to be a disaster. On top of that, let's say the party goes in to see an armorer in the city because someone's looking to buy a new shield. You all walk into an armory and there's a leather craftsman in that armor shop and he sees your shitty leather armor. You've got a problem. You clearly don't take care of the good things that you have. And I would say that that's going to have an impact on your reputation as a...
I agree. I mean, maybe you're trying to chat up the barmaid, but you're in this ratty, tattered, set of armor because you just don't care.
Yeah. I mean, what about rubbing it down and oiling it or, maybe getting that cut that was in there repaired? I think these are all really, really nice ways to sort of maybe fill out the narrative. But then what if we introduced a mechanic or a series of tables that were about armor wear and tear, sustainability, broken armor? This is where Daggerheart.
Well, that's where Daggerheart, and you mentioned it before, video games.
Yeah. So I love that Daggerheart grabbed a hold of this problem. They recognize this. And for those of you who do not know what Daggerheart is the tabletop role-playing game that's been introduced by the Critical Role people, right? And if you have not explored this game yet, they nail this so well. And so well that I want to actually pull some of these aspects into my Dungeons and Dragons 5e game.
I agree.
So what do they do here? So first of all, they separate the two worlds. They separate the worlds of armor and the ability to avoid an attack, right? So you have an evasion score, right? That evasion score is essentially like dexterity. It's your ability to not get hit.
It's kind of the same premise of armor class, where it's the dexterity, the way you evade the attack coming in.
Right. But then the armor has its own function. Now, let's say that your armor class or your armor score is 13. Okay, you have an armor score of 13. That 13 also comes with a series of slots. Those slots are left unchecked. If there's an incoming attack, you can choose to use an armor slot to reduce the damage that you would sustain by the amount of your armor class. So in this case, I could use an armor slot to reduce the damage by 13. I could use 2 armor slots to reduce the damage by 26, but I have to mark those slots.
Yes.
Once those slots have filled up, my armor no longer protects me.
You're done.
I'm essentially unarmored, right? And now I'm taking full damage. Love that mechanic. Then on long rests, I have the opportunity to repair armor. So all of a sudden now we've got this whole new it is a perfect blend of rules and mechanics that have charts and checked boxes and numbers associated with them, blended with this notion of the narrative saying, I got to take care of my stuff.
It's more believable.
Totally.
It's, I agree. And everyone most people like the little mechanics, the I repair this, or, I've spent 3 armor slots and I only have 3 more or whatever. And keeping track of all that little stuff. I mean, I prefer stuff like that.
Right. I absolutely do too. And on top of that, okay, let's, on one level, we can talk about, well, is your armor working anymore? Is it damaged? Is it broken? Like, where are we at with the condition of your armor? Fine. We could stop there. But then there's this other notion of, and I mentioned this last time we talked about how when you played Skyrim, right? I forget what it was I had played as a character once in Skyrim, and I just had a terrible sickly look about me. And all of a sudden, my presence as a player character in towns was addressed by the NPCs. They'd be like, hey, maybe you should get some rest. You look like crap. I forget what it was that caused it to happen. But I would say that if you're not actively keeping up your appearance, then I think your reputation in towns and the way you are perceived by the public should be impacted by that. If your armor's all beaten up and crappy and rusted, you're going to have...
That makes sense.
Somebody's going to be reactive to that, right? So you could really take it to the storytelling level in this case. This is a great opportunity to say, you're going out in those like my mother used to say to me, you're going to go out in that shirt, it's all wrinkled. Right? This is kind of how it works with the armor. It's like you're going into town with that armor, it's all bashed to pieces.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I can agree on that.
So I think this is a good opportunity for you and I to develop these charts.
Yeah.
You want to write them?
Come up with something.
All right. You guys that are listening out there, Garrett and I are going to work on this. We're going to come up with a system. Our personal homebrew helper here is going to be a system of charts and maybe a deeper dive on some of the mechanics of armor and armor class, so that maybe if you want to become a little bit more nuanced, we'll see if we can put that out there for you. I don't know when that'll actually happen. I mean, we're a little strapped for time right now, but
we're busy.
We'll try and make that. We'll try and make that work. All right. So I think this has been really good.
It's been, yeah.
I feel like we've got a really good base for how armor and armor class functions, where it's broken, and where we can start to make things better. I think you guys that are listening to us out there, one thing that, if you're interested in making a table, if you're interested in building a table, meaning your group of players coming together at your table to have a little bit more agency, a little bit more of an investment in their character, then you've got to kind of give them the tools for that. You got to tell them that some of these things matter. And I understand that sometimes getting too deep into the details slows your game down, right? But if you want them to smell the air, if you want them to feel the moisture in the earth, if you want them to notice that there's a little rust around the edge of their armor and maybe they should start to think about getting it repaired, these details make them think in a more believable way. And I think it helps to fill out theater of the mind a little bit.
It definitely helps the immersion of the game if those aspects are implemented.
I agree. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, the immersion of the game.
Yeah.
So dig into armor a little bit, all right? And keep an eye out for what Garrett and I turn out in the future. Yeah. We'll make an announcement if we have something for you. All right, listen, you guys, if you liked this episode, please, like and follow the podcast. We really love the fact that you guys are along for the ride and listening to us. Please tell your friends about it. And we will see you next time for another edition of iCast Guidance. Garrett, catch you later.
Yeah. See you.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix and Garrett Brennan. Head over to YouTube, where we can be found at Wither and Bloom Studios, where you can see the production of this podcast every Sunday morning live at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're looking forward to seeing you there. Take care.